Hey everyone, and welcome back to the news. And yeah, wow, things are actually happening within World of Warcraft. Patch 8.1.5 has a release date, as does the Crucible of Storms, and while Blizzard might have done a minor oopsie with the portal situation, things are actually heating up again with the game. After all, we also know that patch 8.2 is going to hit the PTR pretty soon after 8.1.5 is deployed. First up though, here is this month's Patreon tier. Last month we did the Warrior, and this month we're going on to the Hunter. There's also a sticker that's currently on the way. Yet more wonderful artwork that'll be there. If you want to learn more, head up the Patreon link down below, and over there you'll also find a bunch of behind-the-scenes content. Oh, and also, look at this adventure journal text from 8.1.5. I mean, hell, is that a sentence from Blizzard, or is that one of my video titles? Okay, first up, the size of World of Warcraft. We've recently found out a little bit more about this from a business perspective. It's not super major, but in their SEC filing, Activision-Blizzard shared that World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and Candy Crush combined accounted for 56% of overall revenue in the business, showing how, well, really they're quite dependent on those three franchises. Last year, Overwatch was also included in that list, but not this year, showing that really the lack of Overwatch content, along with decreased player engagement, combined with World of Warcraft, of course, having its expansion, led to WoW being, well, Blizzard Entertainment's largest IP from a financial perspective. BFA, of course, sold incredibly well over its launch year, especially because Legion was really good, and at the same time, allied races were bundled into the pre-order. Post-BFA performance doesn't really factor into this as much overall, but that's definitely something to pay attention to in future earnings calls. Overall, it does show that World of Warcraft is capable of giving the business people the numbers in the spreadsheet that they crave, and frankly, if it's one of the company's big three titles, it's very doubtful that World of Warcraft's going to be going anywhere anytime soon. Okay, next up, release dates. So we have a lot of impending release dates to talk about. Blizzard have confirmed that patch 8.1.5 will drop on the 12th of March, just about a week and a half away from now. Patch 8.1.5 admittedly is a pretty minor patch. It has a roller coaster, battleground updates, the BFA version of the Brawlers Guild, profession items, WoD, time walking, and a few other smaller things. And then of course it's also going to be unlocking the Zandalari and Kultiran allied races, which have been pretty long awaited, and that has sparked off a bit of a discussion about Blizzard's marketing for BFA, even though of course it is true that the delay was because of the Kultiran humans being added as a full allied race, with them, unlike most of the others, requiring a hell of a lot more work, actually being a lot closer to making a full new race. Still, it's about darn time and it's good to see them. Battle for Azeroth really has managed to, I think, go against the steady updates of Legion. BFA patch 8.1 was less content rich than Legion 7.1, and then 8.2 and 7.2, well, with 7.2 it came out on March the 28th, but it looks like BFA 8.2 is destined to be maybe late May, perhaps early June. And really, as a follow-up to Legion, it's quite bizarre, to be honest. The pace of the content has been slow, the quantity of the content that has came out has been pretty low, and frankly, compared to Legion, I actually think a lot of the quality of the content is pretty low, with the exception of the Dazar'alor raid, which does seem to be very highly regarded indeed. This expansion certainly has had a troubled life, and I have to wonder if Legion cost them too much money, leading to BFA having a smaller budget or something along those lines. It's just quite hard to work out why this expansion has been so light on content. Patch 8.1.5 though is going to, well, it's going to do some good things. The heirlooms are going to help level up some alts. The Brawlers Guild is finally going to scratch that itch for challenging solo gameplay, which I am particularly excited about, especially since it seems like one of the more robust Brawlers Guild season updates, coming with its own questline. Then crafters are also going to get some handy items of their own through their own questlines, but most of them, I mean, they're just nice things to have. They're not particularly economically interesting. Now, the next major thing after that is the Crucible of Storms raid. That's going to be the 16th of April, so just under a month and a half away from the release of this video. It's quite a bit of time away, to be honest, but I suppose Dazar'alor is still quite recent, and that raid also will come with a bunch of pretty cool lore quests, like the Xal'atath stuff. Overall, though, I think Blizzard need to learn that just having good raids is not enough for an MMO. They need to have an engaging world. That's very much shown by the Warlords of Draenor struggles, because even at that time, we had great raids, but we had very weak world content. In some ways, BFA has actually left us in a rather similar position. Still, patch 8.2, it seems, at least in concept, to be very interesting indeed. I'm genuinely excited for 8.2, and with 8.15 being off the PTR pretty soon, it means there's now room for 8.2 to be on the PTR, and that will allow us to fully dig our teeth into the next, well, the first major content patch for Battle for Azeroth. Now, there is one other element to 8.1.5 that I haven't talked about yet, and it is a part of the patch that has, well, created a bit of a minor forum scuffle, and that is the portal rooms. Okay, so patch 8.1.5 is adding consolidated portal rooms to Stormwind and Orgrimmar. They're actually quite beautiful art-wise, and they contain one portal per expansion, pretty much having Silvermoon / Exodar, Shatrath, Northrend, Dalaran, Jade Forest, Ashran, Azuna, Borealis. Art-wise, they're quite lovely, and they certainly are a lot more convenient than having portals strewn across the cities. That said, they've came at a cost, one the players did not expect, and it has ticked off quite a few people. So many portals have actually been removed from the game, especially from older hubs. The Legion version of Dalaran has lost its portal to the Caverns of Time, to the Dalaran Crater, to Karazhan, to Wormrest, to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, as well as a few faction cities. Then the Vale has lost its portals to Shatrath and Northrend Dalaran, and then Northrend Dalaran has lost its Caverns of Time portal, with both Stormwind and Orgrimmar also losing their Hellfire Citadel portals. Now, both main cities still do have their Cataclysm transport hubs. Overall, you're just going to see an increase in travel time to a few of those locations, and that has left many people wondering, why has this happened? Well, Blizzard seem to always give with one hand and take away with the other, but they do sort of have a point, saying in a blue post that the world feels larger when there is less teleportation. I think that absolutely is true, but I suppose it's somewhat against how the game is currently played by the people who play it. Once that ground is given, it's kind of hard for Blizzard to take it back, and that really is the core of the problem. Having loads of short-term convenience can make players very happy indeed, but it can also, at the same time, erode from the core of the game. In this case, erode from it being this large, expansive world. Now, if you wanted a large, expansive world and you were designing from scratch, you probably wouldn't litter it with portals. But equally, World of Warcraft does not do a great job of making those old zones relevant. You're not going to just come across something interesting while traveling across the landscape. So I think it's fair to say that while Blizzard may want a big, expansive world, outside of leveling, they actually don't really do anything to make you care about it. So it's a bit of a strange situation. That said, they have updated us saying that the Legion Dalaran portals will still spawn when they're needed for quests, so that's good, but otherwise they are gone, and yeah, it does clamp down on player travel. Personally, I think they have the right goal here, to make the world feel big and expansive, but I think they'd be better going about achieving that goal by making the world itself a bit more interesting. So let me know what you think about that one, and next let's talk about the Crucible of Storms loot, because it has had its item level increased on the PTR such that Cabal drops gear that's 5 item levels higher than Dazara Lore, with Unat dropping gear that is 10 item levels higher than Dazara Lore, meaning that Unat Mythic drops at 425. Now that's fairly interesting because we don't know if the Titan Forging cap is going to increase once 8.1.5 and this raid comes out. Now, I think what's overall interesting, though, is the differences in gear design, because, as I covered last week, Crucible of Storms has honestly some of the most interesting loot tables in the game, pretty much. The items have got these really cool secondary effects, and these effects, though in terms of the itemization budget, do come at the cost of reduced secondary stats. So it's going to be super interesting to see how that balance actually pans out. If a bit of gear has loads of stats, well, it's kind of hard to use that wrong, but if a gear sacrifices those stats for having a cool effect, and then you squander the benefits of that effect, well, then that gear is going to come out behind something of a similar item level, but with more simplistic itemization. So hopefully the Crucible of Storms gear is item level for item level, stronger in the hands of the players who are able to use it to its fullest. I am totally okay with there being a performance gap between players based on both class design and additional beneficial effects like that. You see, back in Mists of Pandaria, this was very much the case. There was a large difference between the great players and the okay players. Especially with things like DPS snapshotting. Of course, over time, Blizzard have decreased the amount of that stuff that was possible, with their goal being to lower the performance gap between the best and the worst players. I think, in fairness, that made a bit of sense. And it is true that the old way did lead to balance problems, but I think it's also fair to say that they went too far in the other direction, and I think that this, the addition of this gear is great. And it might prove that they know they went too far, because most of this gear has like a negative impact if you use it wrong, dealing damage to you, for an example. And that shows that they are willing to make gear that's, well, far more creative. than their previous way of doing things, even going as far as to make gear that could contribute to you being killed in a fight. So I wish them the best with this, and looking into the future, if we have a bunch of really cool Heart of Azeroth abilities from the 8.2 revamp, on top of a few gear effects like this, especially the ones that you've got to play around, you know what? Okay, there are some wild, like, RNG concerns with performance, but I think that could be mitigated by by those effects being things you actually have to play into rather than just being random free damage. But if both of those things actually pan out well, we've got a stronger Heart of Azeroth, we've got this really cool gear, then you know what? I think we're getting to a more Legion-like class design sort of place where there's just more going on, there's more stuff to take into account when you're playing, and I think that really would make elements of combat in the game quite a bit more fun. Next up though, let's hop back over to Desire lore, because Blizzard have decided to make the Gmod mount drop off Jaina instead of Mechatorque, but only in LFR. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. It's LFR, so people would just queue up, they'd ice Gelbin, and then they just drop out. So moving it over to Jaina is a very sensible change, but I've got to admit, it's a bit wild having a mount like this come from LFR. I mean, that is a break in the norm. It feels like Blizzard just did want a bit of a juicy reward that everybody could get so that this raid would have a broader audience. Now, look, just as well, I say that being somebody who right now, if I want to raid, I mean, all I can do is LFR. I don't like have a guild, I'm not set up for that, I actually don't have enough time to commit to full raiding, so even though a change like this increases my personal accessibility to rewards, I just don't feel like I should be able to get that reward for doing an LFR and getting a bit lucky. I'm not sure though, what do you think about it? Let me know down below. Alright, next up, let's talk about the allied races. So the Xandalari Trolls and the Kultiran Humans are going to be out pretty darn soon, just in time for the per server character cap to be lifted, meaning that you could have all 50 account level characters on the same server, which is pretty wild. Now, unlocking the Kultirans and the Xandalari, it should be easy. You probably have it done already. You just need to, well, mostly done. You just need to complete your war campaign as well as your continent quest lines to get your Xandalari Empire / Proudmoore Admiralty up to Exalted. Now, it's been interesting. As the PTRs have progressed, we've seen more customizations be added to these groups, and they really have came on a lot since their initial previews, especially the ones that I did way back in beta, with the Kultirans in particular being far more developed. Now, the only thing I'd say is that I think the Kultiran females have not came off particularly well. I mean, they needed a lot more work, and I think they're a little bit below par. They're just so much less interesting and rugged than the Kultiran men. The Kultiran males are just far more grizzled. They look a lot more, well, experienced and lively, like they've been out in the seas for a long time. They look like their own vision, like proper characters. I think the Kultiran females are just too soft. They barely look like members of the same group as the Kultiran males. I wish they had a more defined, harsher facial structure, more stark shading. But yeah, overall, it's a bit like with the female Worgen. I wish they would just let their female characters be as kind of cool looking as their male characters in a lot of cases. I mean, the Draenei as well, like, the female Draenei are just a less interesting design than the male ones, like with the big, crest ridge and stuff. I mean, yeah, they just seem a bit more kind of simplistic, I guess. I don't know, I wish they do better there and just make things that are less pretty and, well, more interesting. But anyway, yeah, look, I think both of them are, I mean, overall, it's all pretty great, right, getting both of these. They both actually do look pretty good and unique on the whole. Both groups have also had their allied race armor be updated since we last checked in on beta, and you know what? They all look fantastic. Overall, I'd say these are great additions to the game. I'm glad they're finally coming, especially with the Kultirans, who I will say, they feel a bit more unique because they've got their, unique animation kit and their new models, because really Blizzard put a lot of work into them. Then we also see some racial ability balancing, with the Xandalari Troll regeneration ability being toned down a little bit, such that it actually starts off with smaller ticks that increase in power over time, and then with the cooldown also being bumped up by 1 minute up to 2.5. So there we have it. Patch 8.1.5 is almost here, finally. Personally, I'm going to be getting right into it with the Brawlers Guild. I can't wait. As somebody who just does not have time for organized raiding at the minute, some challenging solo content, that's super important to me and how I want to engage with the game, and yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it. So yeah, I guess expect some random shots of me doing that in the future. Past that though, I'm definitely going to hop back into Wintergrasp just for a bit of the nostalgia, but this time at more than 10 frames per second. Now, if you'd like more content, then you can check out my variety channel. Over there, we have loads of game industry coverage. We've got a pretty funky Dead or Alive video, which I think will be quite a laugh that you'd probably enjoy. And then there's also a video about Activision being, Destiny even being free from Activision, and really what that kind of means for the future. So, with all of that, thank you for watching this video. Let me know what you think about the various different topics down below, and with that, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.